Hello everybody and welcome to this first Q&A session after the release of the game, finally! Welcome! Congrats!
It finally happened. My god.
So, who will begin? I am your host, Elsia, and I'm here with Rigbert. Rigbert, could you introduce yourself, please?
I am the other host, Wigbert. That's basically me.
Fantastic, the one-man army, the Italian hero, the beta heroes from the Italian army. I am repeating myself. I will shut up and will allow differential effects and junk and pop to present themselves.
So I'm differential effect. You guys are going to hate this answer, but I think it's going to be uniform for BCS. We have many roles within the company, but currently we're playing the role of community, engagement.
Yep, seconded. We're doing the job right now, coming to you live from an undisclosed location in the States.
Fantastic. Do you have any trivia about you or about what you are doing more precisely, or something you want to share about your company before we start anything?
Trivia. The company has amassed 7 full bookshelves of World War II original documents and books for the preparation of this project. So I think that is an interesting point.
Yeah, it's much more interesting than mine. Amerigo Vespucci's boots are based on a pair that I own. Next question.
I think that is very interesting.
I find
I think too.
All right, well, I think we're ready to get started with the first questions then of our scripted questions. Number 1, what actually is Black Chicken Studio, besides the obvious, of course, of it being a studio?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're really asking there is how did we get the name?
Yeah. What do you guys do? What's your life goals, as it were?
Oh, got it. Yeah, we set up the company back in 2006, 2007, and our purpose was to make as deep simulations and role-playing narrative experiences as possible. And that's kind of really us in a nutshell. I think I think it's fair to say that we really are motivated by the idea of engagement on many different levels, right? With story and the players and player choice, and that's pretty much our DNA, I think I'd say.
Right. And getting to the meat of what this Q&A will be about, the game we're currently playing, Victory Bells. Why did you want to create it? Either you, I guess you personally, the team overall, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a Contai collection player, like many folks here on this call. But I think honestly, there's a kind of an approach to sort of history and maybe the actual time frame of World War II ship girls that we just didn't see represented anywhere, right? Like, they're always like the sirens or the abyssals and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There wasn't really anything about, what that would be like in the real world, and maybe some of the real world sort of considerations or design philosophies and, what did that mean? And so I think that was just really the meat of the love letter we wanted to write to Contai Collection.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything to add, Yank? Or is that basically it?
I mean, that's essentially the soul of the game itself. That's why that's the niche that we're looking to fill. For me personally, it's where a couple of my deep and abiding interests dovetail.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that's similar for the rest of the team as well?
Oh, I think everybody brings their own kind of unique, bit to it. I mean, some bit of it was the fashion of World War II. That was definitely like present in and among the artists.
Mm.
From a design perspective, right? The technology and the technology shifts that occurred during the war, and how to simulate that, like as completely as possible. That was another challenge that I think motivated quite a number of people. And then I could definitely speak for at least some part of the team, the actual development team, who were here for the art. They were like, "Oh, give me these waifus."
All right, and some of us were here during the beta, multiple betas, and some of the new members maybe weren't. How did the beta go from your side, at the very least?
I mean, if I if I ignore the fact that a war started during it, which directly involved, the our development team in Kyiv and part of the team in Russia. If I just take that off the table, yeah, we got exactly what we wanted. We're having actually a pretty dang smooth launch, at this moment, and it's all thanks to the constant iterations and the frustrations that you guys put up with, and kind of bug hunting. And I mean, you guys were super diligent, like playing that game, day after day, and kind of mimicking the experience of like live play. I mean, we can't thank you enough.
I mean, true, you did tell me once you didn't plan on keeping the beta running as long as it did.
No, not just no, but hell no. But then, when there's a war, I guess you just have to adapt.
Hmm. All right.
So now that the beta is done and we are finally having the finished product, how do you describe the type of gameplay that Victory Bells will bring for the player that are starting today to play the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious. It's a collection game. It's a waifu game. We have visual novel elements in it. It's a deep simulation of World War II. Trading broadsides, gun line kind of combat. And it's got, as a cherry on top, a pretty extensive metagame whereby player actions are going to increasingly determine who's available, what's going on with the war and the nations, what opportunities are being exposed, what campaigns you can do or not do, as the case may be. If I had to summarize it at its core, I think it's about collection. But honestly, you guys who were in the beta might have your own flavor of what this game is, for yourself. Any comments, Wigbert, Elsia, anybody else that want to make? Like how would you define it? Like, what do you think as you think of the game?
I'd say at its core, I think we're similar. Diff. It's a love letter to a game we used to enjoy and play much more of. That being Kantai Collection, of course.
Virtual high five to you, buddy.
Yeah.
Definitely, I haven't played that game, but I'm all here for the waifus.
And I do
want
appreciate
to add something about the game.
I do appreciate its more story-based focus than its other contemporaries.
And I
Yeah,
think
that was something that we really wanted to get out there for sure. But I'm sorry, Elsia, continue.
No, I was going to say that, yeah, with the way you wanted to design it, there are many, many different things that can appeal to a lot of players. And so, for me, it's a waifu, so maybe the next question, how did you design them? What went through the process to decide, oh yeah, this one will have this kind of art because that represents something compared to her namesake or something like that, What was the starting point of each design?
Yeah, so it's an interesting process. So first, when we select a Belle, like we decide, hey, this ship needs to be in the game. We create in Mural and then also, secondarily in the database of the game itself, a profile of the ship. So we have a number of these profiles sort of like waiting in the wings, ready to go as people get inspired. And they're pretty detailed. So they show the design elements of the ship, and of course, maybe some of its design history, like what was this ship supposed to do, and you can kind of glean, you can kind of get some personality elements from there, right? And then it goes from there into the namesake. Who is the namesake? Have there been other ships of the same name? What are some of the factors that exist in that nation, in this period that she's being built? Like, how are they thinking about their namesake? We look at, who built her. We look at, the yard that she was commissioned from. We look at her service history. What did she actually do in the war, and how did she end up? And all of this stuff goes into a big pot, and the designer pulls elements out and basically begins to distill it down into first a personality, with a couple of, words to kind of describe who she is in a nutshell. And then, various bits of the design elements that want to go in there. What is the pose? What do we want to draw from the gear? What does she want to show about her namesake, about the conditions, et cetera, et cetera? It takes about 3 months to go from a concept to a fully realized Belle. Like it's a pretty significant process, and it's repeated for the costumes.
Anything you want to add, Jack?
Yeah, well, and the it's a long process, necessarily so, but the journey getting there is fantastic because there's so many things that inform it. There's all the research that goes into it. Of course, there's the Navy Yard, there's the namesake, there's the culture behind it. So that's how you get things like Pensacola having a particular affinity for aviation, for example. That's how Aurora practically stepped fully formed, I think, from our collective sort of noodling on her. She's a relic of the old empire put to a new purpose, and so that some designs, I'm not going to say that they design themselves, but they're easier to sort of get the juices flowing when you have that sort of template that arises. In particular, the other one that was really intriguing was Amerigo Vespucci, of course, because A, she's named after an explorer. B, she's not a ship that you would go to war with. She's a tall ship. She's a sailing ship. So there's that aspect of, okay, well, this is different from just about anybody else that we have in the cast, except possibly Recruit, right? So she has to be visibly different, and she has to sort of view the world differently as well. She has to be a little bit old-fashioned. Of course, she was built after a style, in the modern day. Of course, her hull's metal, and the interior of her is wood, but even so, she still has that spirit about her that's fun to play with.
Yeah. I mean, as far as I can talk about the art to style of the game, I've liked most of what I've seen. There are a few sticking points here and there with various spells, but yeah, it's nothing that it's the game for me.
Well, hey, if there's a sticking point, screw your courage to it. We love talking about this stuff.
They need more pants, man.
It's all about incorrect. I'm sorry, you're desperately wrong on that. They need less pants. Continue.
I think you'll like this next question a lot, Tiff. Let's talk about the battle simulator.
Ah, yes. Okay. Well, I mean, as everybody in beta knows, this is a pretty fully realized set of logic and rules that covers the scenarios that 1930 war planners had in their heads, specifically. Because we're English speaking, right? Specifically the U.S. Navy war planners, with a little dash of what we can glean from how other nations were running their war games. So it's everything from the ballistics of the gun and the angle of fall, and then what type of armor it's hitting and where on the ship, and then can it penetrate, and then if it does penetrate, what sort of critical damage might be incurred. So modeling all of that, but also all the great stuff around torpedoes and the various types of aircraft that can make their attacks. What war planners thought submarines were going to be doing. What they thought, the battleships and the fleets would be doing versus the carriers. It's all baked in there, and it's all using, if not contemporary sources, then sources that were summarizing the knowledge that they had at the particular time. And it's stupidly detailed, probably excessively so, but that's why we built the game.
Like, what do you think the
so
most?
I have a question.
So go ahead, Elsia. Go ahead, Elsia. My bad. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No problem. So you describe how authentic. I know you tried very hard to do something very, I wouldn't say complicated, but very detailed on how the calculus and everything is done. But for me, who isn't very very fond of all those numbers and things, how would you describe the battle system for, casual players, casual history enjoyer?
Yeah, well, that's kind of the interesting thing. So, everybody here, I think probably everybody here knows that you can overlevel and just easily make your way through most anything. If you're not doing hard mode, right, you can just kind of, beat your way to any outcome that you want with sufficient levels. And that's because, if you're not really invested in equipping your Belle the best that she can, promoting her in various ways, if you're not really interested in hunting down, various tactics and employing them, or really thinking too much about what you want to do on the campaign, you can just wind it up and go. That's actually one thing that I think was pretty well done about Kantai Collection in general. Yes, you can't directly influence the combat, but that changes the nature of what you do to be a little bit more around what gear am I putting on my ships, and are they ready for this challenge, and who do I want to bring, and what sort of different strategy that I want to have. So I think you can go deep if you're like a hardcore player, but I also think that you can just kind of zone out and watch as your Belles demolish the enemy if you are a casual player.
And speaking as such a casual player, it's perfectly possible to go through and focus on the leveling up and grinding out the stories that way. Of course, if you want to dive deeper, the advantage is that you can, as Diff went over, you can punch well above your weight with tactics and equipment.
True.
But I prefer to stay in my own weight class.
I can definitely attest to the just over level and steamroll everything strategy.
Tried and true.
That it is.
So unless someone wants to add something about the battle simulator side of thing, I would like to continue asking more questions about different things for the game has to offer. And the next one is about the stories. So there are many different stories in the game, and for us who have the privilege to play the beta, we have seen many different sides of Belles, many different stories. How do you write everything like that? How do you prepare for some Belles to have this kind of stories, this kind of personalities? Is it linked to the design? Is it something else differently? How do you do all that?
Well, I don't think any Belle's story necessarily steps fully formed from the design phase, right? Of course, some of them are a little bit easier to write in terms of personality. Like when we were putting together Aurora, right? We wanted to make somebody who's more severe, austere, somebody who perhaps deals with deals with has her head in sort of a higher plane when it comes to the whole Belleverse like Morgana war thing, right? So there are those aspects that can make it easier, but mostly, I'll sit down and I'll sketch out an outline for a Belle story, and by the time that I'm like 6 conversations in, I'm already a little bit to the right of where I need to be, and sometimes I just veer off entirely, and that's a function of getting to know the character, getting to understand the character, and having the story in mind. Yes, having the narrative, but also just letting them talk, letting them chat, letting them breathe and exist in this world that we're creating. And every Belle's different. They've all got different ambitions, different hobbies, and so part of the writing process is that sort of conversation, and we hope that that conversation is being extended to the readers as well. In terms of what to expect going forward, we're still figuring it out. It's 1939, and the stories that you're reading are just chapter 1.
Actually, I think that feeds into your next question, Elsia.
I was going to pass the bike to Wigbert, because I know he read a lot of the Belle story, so maybe he had something specific to ask of you.
I have done a lot of the Belle stories, probably too many. I like to joke I've forgotten more than most other people know about it. But let's talk about those stories for a little bit. So for those not aware, you can do 2 routes when advancing stories in Victory Bells. You have the foundation, and then you choose between either friendship or romance, however you'd like to go. Let's talk about the differences between those, Yank, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a diverse sort of route that we've taken to those, which stems from the from the sheer cast of writers that we have. We have a lot of people. Who have submitted these, and in terms of story beats, some of them diverge quite a lot in 1939. Some of them, friendship and romance, are quite similar. And the advantage of the latter strategy, of course, is if you want to refer to events happening in a Belle story, in another Belle story, like if in 1940, you have a Belle like, hey, remember what Lexington dealt with in 1939? There's not really a canon conflict. But again, we do want to give these stories room to breathe and to expand beyond where they were in 1939, especially if they start out quite similar in terms of story beats. In terms of friendship and lovers, of course, there's also different statistics that will accrue to you if you go down one or the other, unless I'm much mistaken, Diff?
Nope, that's right. It's effectively the ring. If you're thinking about other games and relationship potential, like gameplay mechanics, it's effectively leaving the story aside. It's mechanically the ring. And
as well, the League of Nations story I see is highlighted here on the list of questions. Yeah, so that's really interesting, and that is going to, especially as we move through the beta, that's going to be what Diff was talking about with the metagame, with player choices. As players make missions and war plans choices, specifically which war plans they complete during weeks that they're mutually exclusive. Now, they're not always going to be mutually exclusive. Sometimes it's going to be a slow news week. But you will make choices throughout the game that we're keeping track of. Calc has already mentioned it earlier today. And based on those choices, you'll see where certain battle lines collapse, where others coalesce, and perhaps even historical events playing out a little bit differently, perhaps even new ones being made. We are discovering this right along with you. Of course, we have some idea of the deep lore and what it all looks like, but again, so much of the middle and even some of the end is still being written.
Yeah, I'd like to ask. During the beta, we sometimes had stories that were neither League of Nations nor specific Belle ones. We had the multiple Belle story, and then the one about let's just call it the bear. Are you planning on doing more of those?
Yes.
Okay. Are we expecting those to come out in the first few months, or how are you? Do you have a plan for that sort of thing?
We do have a plan. We do have a release schedule for these sorts of things, and you can expect a little more in that direction within the first few months of the game.
Okay.
So to go back to what you just said about the missions and the war plans, for those who don't know, who are new to the game, on the left side of your main screen you have the war side, the war thing, where you can choose either to do your country mission, your nation mission, some of your alliance. I don't know every
Alliance is correct. It's correct. You're right.
Or the League of Nations missions. So you have two things. You have the daily missions, simply called missions, and the war plans, which are weekly missions in a sense. And you have the little eye for information, and if you click on it, you can see what the mission is about, what the war plan is about, and this is the thing that will affect later the story. Am I correct?
Yes, all that you say is correct. And the flavor text there, and again, this is evolving. In its current incarnation, the flavor text gives you a sense of, okay, this is the impact, this is the contours of the decision that you're making in terms of advancing the war effort by choosing this war plan. And the way that it's written, especially, just to clarify, is if you're opening up a history book about the Belleverse, right, and you're reading about how it went and the decisions that were made, ideally, the flavor text could plausibly fit into such a setting.
Anything to add, Tiff?
The only thing, and I think it was mentioned before, is that you'll want to select carefully, and you'll want to maybe see if your fellow captains, right, can all be aligned on a common choice, because as you follow sort of the web that these things lead down, you may find that you are getting different bells. You may find that you're getting different bells at a different time frame. You might find that the war or the alliances or how things, sort of flow and transpire are different. That means bases, ports could be different, that sort of thing. There are some pretty wide-reaching effects that you guys can get to based on the beating of your butterfly wings, so to speak. But if you will not be able to always predict every outcome. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, if you're an Italian player, pick this bottom one, please. We're protecting the Mediterranean. But beyond that,
So you mean that yes, those war plans will change either the story and or the gameplay of the game?
Yes, they change every week, in fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, story, gameplay, and yeah, I mean, it's Wigbert's already weighed in on which Italian players should pick, and that's good. We want people discussing where the war should be fought, because rest assured, the Morganas are listening.
That doesn't count. Yeah, you're a voice actor. That doesn't count at all.
I'm a bass baritone. Sin's not a bass baritone. Different people.
All right. Well, before we move on to the questions that have been sent in and eventually opening up the floor, is there anything either of you two would like to talk about or discuss that hasn't been discussed? Permadeath, roses, whatever,
I mean, there's a ton of stuff that I think that we could talk about. I mean, all of the features are our little baby, but no, for me, I just can't tell you how ecstatic I am to see everybody playing the game and to watch players come in and create their accounts and ask questions. I think it's fantastic.
For me personally, it's funny. Like, just as a general principle from a writing perspective, we've kind of steered clear of of putting words in real historical figures' mouths. So you're not going to hear what you might not necessarily hear from Roosevelt about this or that or the other U.S. Navy development. You're not necessarily going to hear from Stalin about what he thinks of the Gnevny sisters and whatnot. But that being said, the impact of the Belles on the real world and how historical figures would interact with them and react to them, and what impact they would have on our culture and our discourse, our media, our history in general, I find that incredibly intriguing. And I'm very, very, again, though, it's general principle. We try and steer clear of leaning too directly on real people, but. Having said that, I'm very happy to see some people striking out in the field of fan fiction and doing that. Somebody submitted a story with one of the U.S.'s top admirals speaking to recruits in the story contest, and I was very happy to see that sort of thing. Come about. I think it's a question on pretty much everybody's mind how one or another person would react. So the imagination that this is fostering, I'm beyond ecstatic to see it.
Yeah, I've read a couple of stories, and a lot of them are pretty good. But I've noticed in the Twitch chat that's also happening currently, someone is a little concerned with permadeath. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Oh yeah, permadeath. Well, the thing about permadeath is that it is very clearly signposted. If your Belle is brought down to a vulnerable state, like to 1 HP, then the game will tell you, hey, there's a fleet with a vulnerable Belle in it. Do you want to pull it out? And by the same token, if you go into a campaign and you don't mean to, generally it's pretty easy to get out of it. But that being said, when a Belle is dead, she's dead, right? And you got to go and rescue her again. So she's not lost to you forever, but you'll need to go through the work of picking up the Vestures again. For those who are concerned about permadeath, so it'll be another process, but you could eventually get her back. Precisely at the stats you had her at, no, but that's why we signpost these things.
Right,
and of course, you take the other path, which is Elsia's path, and just kill them all and enjoy the gravestones.
True.
Yeah, so yes, obviously. So it's a good thing you pointed that, because someone in the Twitch chat also asked, "Oh, do you rescue Belle again if she's a limited time Belle?" Well, when a Belle dies, she goes to the graveyard because you are nice enough to raise a tombstone for her, and on that tombstone you can put a rose. So the rose system that is explained by a chibi recruit in the tutorial can also be applied to the dead Belle, and especially the time limited one. So you can still have new vestures to rescue her again.
Yes, the one caveat being you have to have rescued the time limited Belle in the first place. If you don't, then you're kind of just SOL.
Right, so
but there are plans for time limited Bells to eventually come back and that sort of thing.
Yeah, like you couldn't rose her unless you've met her. As applies to the event Belle specifically. The new ones, you can woo with roses from the beginning.
Yeah.
But
or I should say the core ones.
Yeah, if you already have her and she's dead, you can put a rose on her tombstone anyway.
Precisely.
And also as a caveat, you can't kill every Belle you have on your fleet anymore.
Yeah,
not for lack of trying.
Well, someone did. Someone managed to do it, but you can't anymore because the bug has been fixed.
And thank goodness, we don't want anybody locked out.
Oh, I could steal if I wanted. I could steal.
We would be intrigued. Because I can't think of a way that could be done.
I can think of at least two, but that's not the subject right now. Let's continue with more questions, and maybe if you still don't have any more to talk about the global game, we could start asking the player questions. Is that okay with everybody?
Do you have anything you'd like to add, Diff, before we move on to player questions?
No, I see that there are some in the Q&A on the Discord.
All right, yeah, we're going to start with the ones that have been sent in first, since I always promise them that. Starting with ones from Wellington. First question is, if BCS had unlimited money and the ability to create and implement at the drop of a hat at the best level, what one feature, if any, would you guys want?
See, one of the major problems with this question, and I really struggled as I thought about it, is that we're actually in the process of doing it, and therefore I must not talk about it. So nicely played, Wellington. Nicely played.
Well,
but
hypothetically, if you're going to add something, some future hypothetical that, of course, you're not going to
Yemi
do.
isn't here. You can speak. Yemi
Oh,
isn't here.
well,
We won't
then
tell. We won't tell.
I don't think I'd do anything into the game, but I would say this. There is a big lack of scholarship, at least in the English language, on the Italian Navy and specifically its capabilities from an equipment performance description. So if I had unlimited money, I would send somebody over there to go do a whole bunch of translation.
I support this. If I knew Italian, I'd volunteer, but I don't. Fuck you. Sadly. What about you, Jen? Anything you'd want to add?
No. See, Ninja, we know Vince. Vince is one of the people that we work with, in producing the game. He's very focused on sort of operational histories, strategic histories, but doesn't have, at least at the time that we were working with him, doesn't have a lot of detailed equipment related stuff. So if he's doing something in this area, that's amazing. But we hadn't heard that at all.
And speaking from a writing perspective, I tend to agree with Diff in terms of scholarship, in terms of looking for historical documents that inform your understanding of the era. There's too many paywalls up. There's too many essays, and there's too many documents that are locked behind this, that, or the other paywall. You got to pay $30 on JSTOR to get it. But again, that's less a problem with the game and more about how I believe that information should be collated and distributed and made available. In terms of other things that we could if we would, or what if we could, subtitles. You want them, I want them. There's so much locked behind a language barrier in terms of the lines that have been written for the non-English speaking Belles that I want people to hear and experience and laugh at. If we could have that from the beginning, great. But nature of the beast. People will do some digging and they will find some true gems.
True. All right. Kind of related to that question. Are there any particular features you'd like to take from other games and bring into VB? Say, I don't know, repair buckets from Kantai Collection. Yes, I'm still harping about that, Diff.
I think that's a cool feature, but relatively small, and I think also probably something we'll go down and do. For me, I like what we want to do with a admiral's office dormitory kind of thing, and so I'm gonna stop talking about that. But I think that's what I want to see in Victory Belles.
Future hypothetical, yeah. Anything for you that you'd like?
Well, the my first thought was a little more of a three-dimensional, or at least a little more mobile combat system, like what we have now in all of its depth and all of its dizzying statistical rigor. But perhaps seeing this play out on a battlefield, on a proper sea. Not that what we have now isn't great, but I've been playing a lot of Warhammer. This is on my mind.
Of course. All right. And Wellington's final question: So in terms of historical data that you've managed to get, what's the unicorn? What did you think you wouldn't be able to achieve, but actually obtained?
Yeah, I definitely have a favored treasure here. We actually got the practical design guidebook for torpedoes in the 1940s. So we understand the equations that related, various size and performance characteristics to the engine power, to the payload carried, and have implemented it. So that was a joy to find. Made things a lot easy.
In the process of doing some rewrites for Saguenay specifically, I stumbled across a really intriguing paper on the on religious practices of Inuit people in Eastern Canada, the indigenous people that are from there. And that was really helpful in forming her sort of brand of syncretic, Catholic / native traditions in terms of the sort of her religious worldview. I'm sure I will find out very soon if just how much justice I did her, but it was really intriguing to do a deep dive on and sort of to bring a little bit more nuance to her.
I see. Let's see. And the next question before we start opening up is from Urza. They'd like to ask what impact an alliance or nation's combined score compared to others will have at game launch. So
yeah, so we already talked about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Wigbert.
No, basically for the leaderboards. Yeah.
Oh yeah. We already talked about the importance of the war plans and so on and so forth. The leaderboards. I mean, there are some rewards, right, that come with it, sure. But the impact of the leaderboards is a little bit more broad-reaching than that. It's describing or it's influencing what flavor, if you will, of the choice you make. So if you make a war plan choice A, and that's what the body of the players choose, but that nation is at the bottom of the leaderboard, you're going to get a variant that's different than the variant that you might have gotten if you were at the top of the leaderboard, right? Or in the middle, or so on and so forth. So there's an interplay there too. How well are you doing overall in the war? And again, I should caveat that it's not always easy to predict what's going to yield maybe the ultimate best outcome, right? There's a fog of war in the war, and you're going to have to reason it out what you guys think, is the right play at any particular time.
I think as well we can expect to see the roles of the alliances evolve as the game goes on and the metagame progresses, right? Because that's part of the reason, and I think some of y'all have asked this previously. This is part of the reason, for example, why there's not specific war plan flavor text for the Allies Axis Comintern, because look, the Comintern is just the Soviet Union at this point. The Axis is just Germany at this point. Italy hasn't signed on. Japan hasn't signed on. Of course, the United States hasn't picked a side yet. So, at the very beginning, having the alliances drive the story more than the individual nations would be a little bit redundant. But of course, as these things shake out, that will change.
And technically, Italy and Japan have signed on, but they're not involved in the war.
Right, not Italy. Italy hasn't declared on France yet, and that sort of thing. Again, these things will shake out as we go,
and we'll see if they do.
Oh yeah, if Wigbert has anything to say about it, yes, let's see.
The real power behind the throne. All right, well, we're going to open it up to just general public questions now. That was the last one that had been sent in. Starting at the top, we've got a big iron bow. Oh, sorry, yeah. Go ahead, Ozia.
No, I was going to say his question, yes, but fair question, but I think we already got the answer, because the question was, if it's how the technology shift, does that mean that Victory Bell is intended for gameplays to change radically over its lifetime? So we got the answer a bit earlier with the warplanes, or it will be, change the game, and maybe all you wanted to change if you could.
Elsia, I believe that the person in question was actually asking about maybe some of the technical innovations. Like, for example, during this time frame, you've got helicopters and missiles and radio guided bombs and all different kinds of torpedoes that are magnetically tripped and so on and so forth, homing torpedoes. So I don't think it was about the war plans. I think it was more about the equipment.
Will we change the gameplay?
Yes.
Good thing we asked the question again.
Yeah, if you think about it, some of those innovations, not all of them, but some of those innovations, they will end up changing how you approach battle. And the good news is that we built this out for 1946 in mind. So you can fire at increasingly different ranges. You can do different things with your submarines or your sub chasers. It will definitely evolve as the technology battle is fought.
And as everything changes, and as the warplanes move things and as technology arrives, how will the Alti story, as Sarcastic says, will change future Belle's awakening, the future Bells that are designed? And especially the question was asked before for France, for example, that its ship production, how to say, halted after 1940.
Well, there's a divorce sometimes between which ships awaken and which ships players have access to right away. There's once or twice in the story, there will be reference to one or another Belle that is not in the game. Now, may she be later? We don't know. But in terms of what players have, an impact on, that's my cat. In terms of what players have an impact on, you may see certain ship classes revisited or completed or even built anew that we didn't necessarily get in our world. Again, significant divergence, depends on a few decisions being made, but could be the difference between carriers and battleships, right? That'll depend on your choices.
And let's say the people really want to focus solely on battleships. Would that be possible in the future?
You'll know when you come.
Yeah, I think to expand on that, read over your war plans. Maybe those of you that are really pretty well versed in in sort of real world design and construction might begin to see how you could create such an outcome. Yes. Including paper ships, absolutely.
All right. Let's see what else we got here. We basically answered Kat's story, or Kat's question. Let's go with the one right below it. So whilst the Belle story is going to diverge from 1939, what happens when something like the technology race that happened in both the interwar and World War II itself, is the game going to stick to largely concepts understood by the start? Or are we going to get things like surface-to-air missiles?
No, I think that spoke to the earlier question. You will the technology battle will continue to be fought.
Though this time with maybe some fancy extra bits. Yeah.
Yes, if you want to go down the path of madness, yes, absolutely.
I mean, it's an interesting path. I may or may not have done it before. Let's see. Calc wants to know why Spain and Turkey are considered part of the Axis.
Yeah, I mean, as everybody on this call, I'm sure knows, they're not. Nor is Netherlands at this particular time a part of the Allies. Poland obviously is, or will shortly be. Um, that's just a gameplay consideration, or rather a content consideration that we took an early decision on to map it. We didn't want to, at least at the time that we were doing it, we didn't want to have to build content for each of the minors and progress that. So we mapped it into a major that would more or less house their particular bent or leanings, or where their interests were historically, etc. I do expect that will change, but I don't think that that's going to change in the short term.
Okay. Let's see. Someone wants to know if we can make BBVs eventually.
Sky's the limit.
Yeah, you can kind of sort of do it now. If you get your refit capacity up really, really high and unlock like hangars and so on and so forth. But I still think you're limited to scouts only. So you could pack your battleship full of scouts, I suppose, but you couldn't get a proper flight deck. That will come, guaranteed.
Yes, we can actually have USS Pringle at some point. I believe it's Pringle. Let's see, any other important questions? This is one from the Twitch stream. Someone's worried that, or are you worried that people might only choose war plans based on their rewards and not necessarily the story?
It could happen. I will say this: we have a number of different thoughts around it. Do they occur at different difficulty levels? Are there different rewards? There's a temptation, right, to kind of see how much players will be like swayed off what they want to do versus what their rewards are. But the simple truth is, I think in the end, where we're going to go is that war plans are going to have equal rewards. They don't at the moment, but I think we're going to go to war plans have equal rewards. It just makes the conversation more interesting, and it gives people, a lot more appeal in, hey, I should engage with this part of the game to figure out what I'm going to choose, versus some obvious, oh, well, this one gives me 25 more steel, right? So I'm going to pick that. Yeah. So it's a good question, I think.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, Calx asked, what's happening with the merch, especially the art book?
Yeah, so now that we've reached launch, when things cool down, right, we need to go figure out if any of our existing contracts are still honorable to be honored. I don't know. That's something that the team is going to figure out. Who are we actually going to get now to fulfill? So we've got our mocks and we've got our protos, and it's ready to go. It's ready to be produced. But obviously, we stopped short of actual production, some years back, right? So now we have to pick that back up and go, hey, is it still the same price, still the same terms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's gonna take us a little while to sort out, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Here's a question I haven't seen asked today. How's today gone? It's launch day. You doing good?
The fact that Jank and I are here, and we've spent now about 55 minutes.
About, yeah.
I'd say that this is the smoothest launch I've ever been a part of.
True, I have to agree.
I got in probably a minute after someone said it was launched, started downloading it, had no issues receiving any of my things. All worked well for me. Let's see. Don't really have any questions that are pertinent at the moment.
Well, all right. Then it's back to the mines for us, and you guys, thank you.
Oh, we got a quick question. Because I think I know the answer. There are not multiple servers. It's just one global one.
It's one global thing, yeah.
Also, to our friend here in the Twitch chat, there is not clothing destruction.
Sad.
Can we qualify that? Can we say yet? You know what? Actually, I go back. I want to revisit my answer. If there's one thing that I could put in with unlimited resources, it's clothing destruction. How about that?
There is one Morgana that has clothing destruction, and it's fire.
Yes.
When she dies, she has a different sprite.
That is
So
true.
yes, it's already in the game. Just have to look for it.
Well, and I'll also, and let me say this about that: clothing destruction would be much more useful for some Belles than for others. I have a certain Italian submarine in mind.
Oh yes.
Well,
Yeah,
you need to have
might
clothes
actually-
for them to be destroyed after all.
Yeah,
Precisely.
she might actually get clothing, right? That's what happened there.
Calc wants to know plans for training ships for each nation, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can. Well, first of all, Recruit is awesome. She's amazing, but she's also Manhattan American, right?
Mhm.
So I definitely think that as we go along, we eventually must have training ships for all of the nations. We don't have any fixed plan in that regard, but you can kind of see we're setting up for it, right? With Amerigo Vespucci and
John Dark.
the name escapes me now.
And
Joan of Arc, yeah.
yes, Joan of Arc. Jeanne d'Arc.
Well, see, with the actual French person on the phone, I cannot try to speak French, so that's why I had to translate.
Before you go back to the mines, though, Diff and Yank, and before I thank you, is there anything you'd like to say about the stories that were sent in? Since I'll be announcing the winner for that after we wrap this up.
I read a number of them, and I think, as I mentioned to you, Wigbert, I found them really compelling. Like there's a part of me that's like, hey, why aren't these in the game?
Yeah, no, there's definitely a few that I found myself thinking, wow, like if we could clean this up a little bit and give it the treatment that it deserves, if X was happening in the game, like this is how we would depict it, right? And certainly they all had aspects that I was intrigued about, that I would want to see explored more. Now, there's a few that where they were firing on just about all cylinders, and of course, that'll be announced in a moment. But again, I really enjoyed seeing what people sent in. Will we get the Old Ladies Knitting Club of Victory Constitution? You write it. I want to read it.
I want to read it too. Please actually write that. But thank you, Diff. Thank you, Yank, as always. Thank you for everyone watching.
Thank you
Thanks
very
especially to Elzia for co-hosting this so I don't have to speak all the time. That is a godsend.
And thank you, Insida, for hosting this Q&A on your Twitch channel. Yes. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And thanks to everybody playing or listening. Like we really appreciate it. We made this game with you guys in mind, and we hope you enjoy the naval history and the technology and the bells and the whole shebang.
Yeah.